Hi everyone and welcome back. In today's video I'm going to be doing a review and demonstration of the Ohuhu art markers. These are alcohol-based double-ended markers with a chisel nib on one end and a fine nib on the other. I'll be looking today at the 80 marker pack, which currently retails on Amazon and the Ohuhu website for $39.99 US. Obviously, online prices vary, but that's the price at the time that I'm recording this video, and that works out as roughly 50 cents a marker. That makes these a very affordable option if you're looking for an alcohol-based marker. I'll be taking a look at the markers in details and testing them out, but first I want to say a quick thank you to Ohuhu for sending me these markers to review. Ohuhu makes a variety of markers, brush pens and fine liners, and they have recently made some of their products available on Amazon in the UK, Spain, Germany and other European countries as well as the US. So even though this set was sent to me by Ohuhu to test out, this is not a sponsored video. All the opinions and thoughts in this review are honest and my own, as always with all my reviews. So let's get started and take a look at the markers. The markers come in this little carrying case. It's made from a tough canvas type material. It has the Ohuhu logo printed on one side. It has a zipper closure and a small handle on the lid of the case. Upon opening up the bag, there are a lovely variety of colours. The markers are not too tightly packed in, so you can move them around and sort through, and there's also a little extra room in there if you wanted to add in a couple of other pens. So if you're going to take these around and use them, you could add in a highlighter pen, some fine liners, a pencil, and the case would hold all of that. They would just have to be a similar height to the markers. I'm a big fan of supplies that come with a storage solution and packaging that you can reuse instead of throwing away, so I really liked this little case. It's a nice way to be able to carry the markers around, and you can store the markers in the case whilst you're working, and it's easy to look through the colours and pull out the ones that you need. Apart from the markers, the case also came with a printed colour chart, a card with a discount coupon and a few FAQs printed on the other side, including what to do if you get a dried out marker or a duplicate marker in your set. And they say that you can email them and they will replace any dried out markers or duplicates for you, which is good to know. The other thing that came in the case is a sheet of plastic which says it's designed to be placed behind your pages to stop the markers bleeding through multiple sheets of paper. So if you're working in a sketchbook, then the idea is you can use this to prevent bleed through to other pages in your sketchbook. I think this is a really nice idea. However, as you can see, the plastic sheet is bent. I think probably from being tucked around the markers in the case. So it was definitely a nice idea, but it's not too usable being bent. I will see if I can flatten it out, but at the moment it's not very usable as it is. Colours on the colour chart are somewhat close to the colours printed on the marker caps, but it's not exact. Not many printed colour charts are, and that's why I always make a swatch page with any art supplies that I get. So moving on to the markers themselves, I have the 80 marker set here. Ohuhu does have larger and smaller sets available. The markers have an oval barrel design with the colour numbers printed onto both caps. There are no colour names, just numbers. They have a chisel nib on one end and a fine nib on the other. The nib ends are marked on the barrel of the marker, and the fine nib end also has a small grey line between the barrel and the cap, so you can quickly see at a glance which end is which. The marker sits very comfortably in the hand, and I really like the oval shape of the marker. I find that this is the most comfortable marker shape. It's very similar to the Copic barrel, but a tiny little bit longer. In terms of size, it's closer to a Copic than to an Arteza or to a Pro marker. The fine nib end is smaller than the Arteza fine nib, so if you are someone that does a lot of colouring in small areas or you need a fine nib for details, then this marker might be good for you. I swatched out all the colours onto my regular marker paper. I always do this as the marker colours can actually look different depending on the paper, so it's always a good idea to create a swatch page on whatever paper you normally use for colouring. The colour variety in this 80-piece set is really good. There are a nice variety of colours. There are some warm and cool greys, which I find very useful for shading. there's a variety of brown and earth tones, and just generally a good balance between light and dark shades. There were not too many very pale or pastel colours in this set, so if you wanted a set with lots of pastel colours, then this might not be the best set for you. And there were 2 fluorescent markers as well, a yellow and an orange. I usually like a lot of muted colours and I use a lot of browns in my colouring. This set does have quite a good variety of browns. I would have liked a few more muted colours, but that's just based on my personal colour preferences, and whether or not this set will be useful for you will depend on your art style and what you like to colour. I think though that this set does have a good variety of colours and would work for most things. The colours on the marker caps don't match exactly the colours on the paper. That's quite normal for markers, and it's why I make a swatch page. I didn't find any of the markers to be dried out or not working properly, but if you ever had one in your set that was dried out, then you can get it replaced. Next, I'm working on a test page where I'm trying out the markers, seeing how the nibs feel and doing some blending tests. The nibs, as I mentioned earlier, are a chisel and a fine nib. The fine nib is not the same as a brush nib, and generally speaking, brush nibs make markers more expensive. So if you want markers with a brush nib, you tend to pay more. Of course, it depends on the brand, and the higher quality the brush nib, the higher the price generally is. That said, you can certainly get smooth colouring and blends with the chisel and fine nibs. I know I've said this before in other videos, and I'm sorry if you have heard it before, but it is something to discuss when looking at different marker brands. Ohuhu does actually make brush nib versions of these markers. I'm not sure if they're available in Europe yet, but I do know that they have them on their US website. And I would be very interested to see how the brush nibs compare to these fine nibbed markers. Brush nibs do tend to make blending easier. I personally find that blending is easier with a brush nib because the ink flows better and the nib is more flexible. As I was testing out the markers, I got a variety of thick and thin lines from both the chisel and the fine nibs on the markers. The chisel nib is definitely the best choice for colouring larger areas, as the ink seems to flow much better from the larger chisel nib. The fine nibs were great at creating fine lines, and I was also able to create some really nice blends between different shades of the same colour, and then also being able to blend different colours together. I did quite a few blending tests with different colours, and I also created some new colours by layering different colours on top of each other, and overall the nibs and the inks performed really well. As I usually do when I have a new supply, I like to create several drawings and just colour with the markers off camera for a while before I do my review, just so that I can get a really good feel of how the markers perform. I did a couple of little sample illustrations, and now I'm working on my main piece for this video and colouring in these different natural elements. I'm working on Bristol board paper, and I've used a alcohol marker proof fine liner to do the line art. I started out by laying down a flat colour first and then going in and adding shadows with the darker shades. A couple of tips for creating smooth, non-streaky colouring is to first have the right paper. Bristol board works very well for markers, and there are also other specialty marker papers out there as well. And my other tip is to overlap your colouring. So keep going backwards and forwards as you're colouring and overlap all your strokes. This will really help to create a smooth layer of colour. If you're colouring a larger area, then use the chisel nib, as it will help to lay down more ink than the fine nib does. As for shading and blending different colours together, I like to start with a flat layer for the lightest colour, then add in the shadow colour and use a mid-tone to blend the two together. I almost always work in several layers, so if you're having trouble getting a smooth blend, then add more layers and just keep blending. The purple bowl that I'm colouring here has 4 or 5 layers of the mid-tone and shadows built up to create the blend. If you're not a fan of the brighter colours that come with this set, you can layer up the markers to create new colours, and you can add greys to brighter colours to tone them down and make them more muted. I also used the fine nibs to create some texture in the colouring. So there were some areas, particularly in the yellow flower, that I didn't blend in too much because I wanted the strokes to show through at the end and to create some texture in the colouring. So one other thing I'd like to quickly touch on here is the replacement and refill options for the markers. Currently, there are no refill options for the markers and they're not available open stock. What this means is that when you use up a certain colour, you can't buy a new one on its own to replace that one marker you may have used up. In my experience, generally when I'm using markers, there are always 1 or 2 colours that I use up before all the others. So if you do run out of a marker, you'd have to buy the whole set again instead of just getting that one colour. I have emailed Ohuhu about this and asked them if they're planning to make the markers available open stock or whether they're considering manufacturing a refill for the markers, and I will leave any updates about this in the comments section down below the video. I did discuss this as well in my Arteza marker review video, but whether or not this is an issue for you will depend on how often you use the markers. I think if you're starting out, or you want to buy a set for someone who is a beginner, or you want a set for yourself and you just want to see if you like the markers, and you don't want to spend a lot of money on something you're not sure if you're going to like, then these more affordable sets are really good for that. And by affordable, I mean less expensive than other marker brands. I think these markers are also good if you want a set to just be able to pull out and use every now and then, but it's not your main art supply or your main medium. For me personally, I use markers a lot. They are the main art supply that I use, and because of that, I prefer refillable markers and at least ones I can buy open stock. This tends to be more economical in the long term because when you refill, you're refilling the same marker over and over again and not constantly throwing them away. But that tends to apply if you're using markers on a really regular basis, because if you're using an art supply a lot, then you need to be able to get replacements for your most used colours. So overall, I think that this set is really good value. The marker ink is good, it comes with a lovely variety of colours, and you could always start with a set like this and mix and match in other brands into your collection. I use multiple alcohol-based markers together, and they've always worked really well, so you can build up a collection of multiple brands, and the Ohuhu markers are certainly a really nice option if you're looking for a place to start. I like that the company has provided a storage solution within the packaging. I always appreciate that. These markers don't have brush nibs, but Ohuhu does have that option if that's something you're interested in, but nevertheless these do blend well and you can get smooth colouring with them. If you like to carry your art supplies around with you, work in different places, then this little bag of markers is light and easy to take around. I hope that this video was helpful if you were looking at these markers, and please feel free to leave any questions in the comments down below. I will do my best to get back to you. There are links to the markers, and I believe there is also a sale running on the Ohuhu UK Amazon page until I think December the 8th, so all of that is linked in the description box below. Thank you again to Ohuhu for sending me along this set to test out. Thank you all for watching and have a creative day.